stop the party. I try to reconcile.
Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Rebel City Podcast. This week we are following up from a recent episode with Councillor Kim Long, standing for Holyrood this year, with Keiran O'Neill, who will be standing in Glasgow for the Scottish Labour Party. Keiran, thanks very much for taking the time out of the campaign to come and speak to us.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Not all, man. How's things?
Aye, well, I mean, COVID, life, you know, it's not really a great time to have an election, is it? We've all got enough going on at the minute, and I'm spending a lot of time speaking to people, mostly on the phone, going, "How are you getting on?" You're like, "Well, how do you think I'm getting on?" But I'm not very excited to be the Labour and Co-op candidate for Maryhill and Springburn, which is the part of the city where I grew up and where I live. And you know, it's 10 weeks to date polling day, and I'm really looking forward to getting out there. Well, might be getting out there on a digital doorstep, so to speak, but just looking forward to getting on with it and seeing what happens.
Such a change to things. When we talk about obviously that sort of 10-week deadline, there is obviously another sort of deadline that's relevant to the Labour Party at the moment. I think we're talking 24 hours until sort of polls close for the leadership election. We'll obviously, you know, come back round to your journey and how you got to here, but with that being quite a sort of pressing issue, you know, I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to name names, but what would you generally like to see for the new Labour, whoever the new leader of the Labour Party is?
Aye, first thing I would say is, you know, just I've said it before, so again, you know, to pay tribute to Richard Leonard, who was our leader for the past 3 years. You know, Richard did put in a shift for the party. He's been active in the movement all his life, and you know, he's now getting a well-earned rest, so to speak. And we're electing a new leader. You know, people make jokes. You know, Scottish Labour Party elects a new leader every couple of weeks. But what's happened this time, and it's been quite unusual. The process has been really, really short. And it's been really friendly, it's been really comradely. You know, we've got two excellent candidates in Monica and Anas. They're both friends of mine. I know them both personally, I work with them both, I campaign them both. Either would be an exceptional leader for the party, not just for these elections, but going on past that. Yeah. But I suppose what we need is we need somebody that can bring the party together. And there's also an element of the party, you know, needs to get behind whoever wins. And, you know, we say that after every election, but we really can't afford to not be united 10 weeks away from an election. And you need to set out a very clear progressive agenda for what Scottish Labour offers the people of Scotland. So before Richard stood down, we were saying we were going to have the most progressive manifesto of any mainstream party in the history of devolution. I'm hoping that at the very least, but I'm also hoping that the new leader will bring forward a strategy as how we can win back the trust of people whose support we've inevitably lost over the last few years. And I do think they both have good ideas. They're both good candidates, and I'm looking forward to working with whoever's successful and campaigning for them to be our leader.
Yeah, man. I think one of the most important things for me, I mean, we're talking about we now live a digital life, you know, and it is really important. And we've spoke, I think as we've been doing the podcast 3 years now, we started sort of like ignoring Twitter. And as the times went on, like social media, but as times went on, I feel like these 3 years, things are becoming more real, like the opinions that exist there are sort of like real life opinions, and bit by bit that's becoming more of the case. But both Monica and Anas are really sort of prevalent on socials. Richard, not so much before his election, and I feel like when he came in, he didn't really get a fair crack. Do you think is that a reflection of like his term?
I mean, I think the fact is, you know, if you're going to be a politician in the 21st century, you need to have a pretty good handle of social media. I mean, Twitter is an absolute bin fire. But the fact is, yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, there's no two ways about it. You know, I am addicted to Twitter. You know, I tried to get up for Lent last year in the middle of a lockdown, and it didn't end well. So I'm trying something easier this year. I'm half booze for Lent, so we'll see how that goes. But I think, you know, you do need to be really, and one of the things that both of them are talking about is, you know, bringing the party, you know, proper digital campaigns, which has got so important, not just at this, but it should always be important. I know it's one of the things that my campaign in Maryhill and Springburn, you know, the sort of a digital doorstep, you know, a digital campaign. Because the fact is, how many people, you know, read newspapers anymore? How many people, you know, watch the 6 o'clock news? How many people will, you know, read their emails? and you compare that amount of people that are on Facebook or on Instagram, on Twitter, that are getting their news, getting their information through there. And there's loads of issues with that. We could have a conversation about fake news. It would last about an hour. But there does have to be, and I do think
we're actually planning a few of them.
aye. So it's really, really, it's important. And I think it's fair to say that the Scottish Labour Party has kind of been missing in the field sometimes when it comes to digital stuff, with a couple of notable exceptions and individuals who are very good at it. So both the leaders, both the candidates seem to recognise how important digital is to the party's strategy. So I'm hoping, praying, and everything else that whoever does it will stick to that. And that is crucial, because the fact is, maybe we spend too much time worrying about what's in a press release, but at the end of the day, nobody sees that. Whereas a tweet or a Facebook post or a video, politics is about telling stories, and you need to go to where people are. You can't hope that, and this isn't just we could talk about it in any policy issue. You can't just hope that people will come to where you are. You need to go to them. So I do hope that that we're going in the right direction. So I think we are, but it needs proper investment, and it needs just sometimes we're a bit too old fashioned. We need to take it seriously. It can't just be something we expect younger people to do. Everyone. So it's a really important thing, and
this is something we've spoken about a lot outside of social media, is that we're at almost like a kind of societal tipping point in a lot of respects, where, again, we touched on it with Kim, that some of the old ideas about how we organise, even things like how we organise labour, how we, just there's a whole load of things that are new and need new ideas and need that sort of progressive approach. And and I think I'm glad to hear that, because definitely see it. I've definitely seen it personally in Monica Lennon's campaign. Like, if I was a Labour member voting, that's probably where my vote would be going personally. And I hope that that's something that we can definitely see, Mary, because it's definitely, her policies, even Richard Leonard's about the care service and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. There are good ideas in there within the Labour Party in Scotland that just are not getting out in the right manner.
The National Care Service, which is now the government and a favourite, Labour's been arguing that for 10 years, and before we argued for it, other political parties argued for it, and I think it's Paul Hutchin, who's the political editor of the Daily Record, makes the point, whenever one of your policies that we go, this is, they've nicked your policies like that. Well, question is, why was nobody interested when you were saying it? So I think that's, a lot of people say that to me, we love Labour's ideas, Labour talk about the issues that matter, but they don't see us as the vehicle to achieve it. I see it as my job as it's certainly in my own neck of the woods, but also wider to change that and be part of the generational change that the party needs north of the border.
Mate. I think that's the big hurdle that Scottish Labour face and the next leader really faces, because I've got a friend that stays in the sort of border between Carntyne and Ridley, and Paul had went to their door at the last general election, and they watched the podcast. They tell me they watch the podcast. Well, no, they do. I don't know, but they had said to me, like, we watched the podcast. We liked him because get a bit of his personality. He came to the door, spoke to him for about half an hour. Liked his ideas, liked what he was saying, but then it just sort of comes back to, but I can't vote for him. Just because of the sort of, I think it's a toxic mix of the want for independence in the country and seeing what the Labour Party did during the 2014 referendum, that's kind of like sort of put a couple of nails in a coffin. So I think we need opposition, we need balance, we need the left in this country. So I'm genuinely hoping that the next leader can actually achieve pulling some of that back.
See, on leadership, obviously one of the big talking points for the sort of wider National Labour Party has obviously been Keir Starmer. He's took a bit of stick in the last week or so from party members, local party members, because of stances on like Matt Hancock's position and things like drug policy and that. Like, would you like to see more of these sort of progressive ideas that we're talking about in Scotland make their way to like the national level? Because, that disconnect seems present at a national level as well as a local level, does it not?
I think Keir's leader of the UK party had won a resounding mandate. It was a bigger mandate, I think, than the one that Jeremy won in 2015. So I don't think there's any excuse for no being bold and no being radical. I think he had 10 pledges to the members. And I didn't vote for Keir Starmer. I voted for Lisa Nandy, but he is my leader. I support him. He'd be a much better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson, but that can't really be the height of our ambition being better than Boris Johnson.
Aye.
So I think it was an interview did with somebody in Sky News. I've not seen it, but I understand the gist of it was he said he's not calling for Matt Hancock to resign, and he doesn't support drug decriminalisation. So first thing in the Matt Hancock thing, I think we're in a really, really bad place in our politics when people in power, politicians, people that make decisions, when they do something bad, they don't think they have to resign. I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think it's sustainable. And I can list a number of examples. Whether it was Margaret Ferrier, who obviously broke the restrictions, whether it was John Swinney over the SQ example. I can cite examples from my own party and other parties. It's not just a case of I can think. But at the end of the day, I think a big part of politics is trust, and there has to be a recognition that if there's an egregious mistake, you should do the right thing. You should step down. It's just basic decency, and what Matt Hancock appears to have done is completely illegal, is completely immoral, and regardless of the horrendous way that the governments have dealt with COVID and how they respond to that alone is reason that he should be handing in his daughters. But they're not going to do it because it's not. That's something we need to do, and I don't think. I don't know why we aren't saying it. I think there'll be a focus group or polling that says, maybe people are a bit like, it's a bit like, can't criticise them because everyone with the vaccine rollout, we need stability and all that. But at the end of the day, if somebody makes a mistake, if somebody, it's corruption effectively. What looks like it's going to Hancock, and I don't think there's any place for that in our politics.
Yeah,
it's a bit frustrating when you see that they're almost certainly about to ride a wave of goodwill as the vaccine and stuff like that roll out. We're starting to see national polling separate quite significantly in a lot of cases. And when we talk about fake news and all these other things, lack of accountability is going to be one of the main reasons why people lose faith. And I'm totally with you on that. It needs to matter when you make mistakes. It needs to matter when you make such a mess out.
I feel like this is something that's actually prevalent in a sort of British sense of the establishment or the authorities can't actually admit that they've done something wrong. It's it's like a really old school way of thinking of never admit you're wrong, because then people lose faith in you, your support will lose faith in you. But what they're not realising, or I feel like the disconnect happens is that in the information age, and we're talking about adapting politics to suit the way that we live our life now, we know so much that goes on that there can be no longer this lack of accountability, because this again, I'm going to just echo what Matt said. This is what causes the shit that we've seen in America. This is what causes Brexit. People, the breakdown, lack of trust in the establishment and the institutions leads to this almost nihilism, political nihilism. Doesn't matter who you vote for, you're going to get the same shit sort of pushed in your face.
We've been watching the series this week, by the way, so you might.
I'll need to watch it. No, but I think that when the genie's out the bottle, it's very, very hard to get it back in. And sorry, just to come back on that point, so I think the second thing that Keir was about drug decriminalisation. I really struggle to understand how somebody who had a very distinguished career in the legal profession could think that the way that drug laws work in this country work. Now I say that for two reasons. One, because I've got family experience. I'm not going to go into it in here.
Of course.
And I've seen what drugs do to families, and I think a lot of people that live in Glasgow, a lot of people that live all over the UK have similar experiences. And also since I've been selected, but a wee bit before that, I've been at Springburn Parish Church. I think you had Natalie from Cisco on your podcast.
Yep.
The work Faces, the voice in recovery, and the drug death statistics. I just don't know how anyone can think that what we're doing right now is working. And I remember going to it was during the general election, and it was myself, Paul Sweeney, Monica Lennon, Richard Leonard, and Aileen McKenzie, who's the Labour councillor for Springburn. And it was listening to the story. It was just heartrending. These are, you get the thing when you talk about drugs, people go, "Oh God, junkies," if there's a word I could strike for the dictionary, it would be that one. At the end of the day, this is people's families. It's mums and dads, sons and daughters. And I'm sorry, it isn't working. And for every single moment that we refuse to accept what needs to be done, more people are going to die and more families are going to be torn apart. So Keir is wrong in that. I've said Keir's wrong in it. But at the end, what I'd say is, in the Labour Party, the leader doesn't make policy, conference does. And I'm confident conference will set the record straight on that when it meets. And I'll certainly be wanting to make that happen. And a lot of people will.
I think that's really refreshing to hear. We've heard people not toe their party line or whatever, but I think that's really good for people to hear somebody that's running for office in this country disagree, because I feel like in this time as well, we can't disagree. We feel like we can't disagree with each other. It's almost like this: if you disagree with me, then I hate you type thing. We need to be able to debate.
We do definitely. I mean, I'm bad as anyone for toeing the party line. You know, I'm a big believer in collectivism and all that. What I would say is drug decriminalisation Scottish policy. Monica had steered that through her. It was actually a blinder when we pulled that off. So, I mean, I am advocating party policy. I think that's one of the good things about the Labour Party, which I don't think other political parties do. The fact is we do love an argument in the Labour Party, but that's because we're no one thing. We're a collection of trade unions, socialist societies. It's a big melting pot. It's a crucible. Mm-hmm. So it's good there isn't loads of idea, and we will have a debate in conference. We'll sort that out. But at the end of the day, I repeat the point. I just don't know how you can look at the current situation, especially when you've worked in the legal profession, and think, "Oh, this is fine. This is totally fine." Exactly. So I'm confident. That issue will be resolved at conference.
I think it's something that is one of the areas like national care where the actual Scottish Labour Party has been quite strong on it in the last couple of years, and as I would say, just how the party's perceived up here is a lot of folk have maybe missed it. But we've hit you a couple of party related stuff up front, and obviously normally we like to let folk get into their stories. So we'll kind of bring it back a wee bit, all right? And just ask you where did your political journey start?
I know probably everyone you speak to about politics says this, but I never had any ambitions of getting involved in any of this. And some days I wake up and I'm like, why the hell did I let myself get involved in this bloody mess? But no, I didn't. I was never really political. I mean, I did drama at school, and I went to RCS for uni straight out at 17. Some people say I'm in a different type of show business now, which I think
that's what I was thinking, mate.
I'm told politics is show business for ugly people. So just as well this is a podcast and not a record, just a video. But it was never something. It was never something. I mean, I had opinions. I'm quite a mouthy guy, and I'm a gossip, so to speak. So I've never had a problem telling people what I think or the issues. But it wasn't until, so I'm 23, but the referendum in 2014, I was 16, so it was the first time I could ever vote. And I think originally I started off going, I'm going to vote no, because it's just the status quo. And then I got more involved in stuff. So I was really involved in the arts, and quite a lot of people, as I'm sure you'll know, in the creative industries were very pro-independence, big yes voting community in the arts, things like the National Collective. So I looked into it a bit more, and I got interested in, I suppose, the referendum and the idea of Scotland becoming independent was what politicised me. It's what got me involved in the political process. It didn't do a lot of campaigning, but was like a social media warrior, so to speak. Had all these opinions, early days of a better nation. Very, very hopeful, very optimistic, and hope's a big part of my politics, I would say. I mean, if you can't offer people hope in politics, we're doomed. Exactly. So that was probably that's kind of what got my foot in the door, so to speak. But I was never, I never at school. I didn't take an interest in politics or modern studies like that to my 6th year after the referendum. And it was never something that I wanted to do. I got involved in different youth work groups. I did youth work, got involved with a couple of charities, did like political activism and try to, things like votes at 16, stuff like that, all the sort of obvious stuff. So it really was never something I planned to do. And, I say this quite a lot. If you told me 5 years ago, before I got involved in the referendum, or 7 years ago, that I'd be a candidate for the Labour Party for the Scottish Parliament, the Labour and Cooperative Party, the Scottish Parliament, I would have probably laughed at you. But through a strange series of events and stuff that's happened to me in my life, it's where I am. I'm very fortunate. So politics is it just kind of happened to me, I suppose. I think politics happens to everyone. So it's just. It was weird, it really was never something I planned on doing. But
you feel like a bit of a late bloomer. Like usually when we ask the question, it's like I was flying a red flag for the pram with my mom, and
no,
like...
that's the thing. You know, I've got really, really good pals that, you know, went in marches. You know, went to May Day in their buggy. Were against the Iraq War. And I've not got a political family. You know, I'm the oldest of six.
Right.
You know, we're a big family, and you know, we never. I mean, raised well, good values like that, but never really like, oh, you need to vote Labour or you need to vote SNP or this stuff. You know, no politics. So it was all my politics. You know, I learned myself, or I learned through people that I met. You know, it's no, and I certainly don't get my politics through, you know, politics books, because I contradict myself quite a lot. So, I suppose I was a wee bit of a late bloomer, but I think you could say I've made up for it.
Yeah, sounds like it.
That's encouraging for me to hear, because I'm not a big fan of the idea of people sort of like aiming to get into politics. You know what I mean? Like, I think that the movie series The Omen was almost like a metaphor for like that type of grooming of young people to move into like power later on. That basically you're the Antichrist if you want to do that. But well,
if Avi Satani starts playing at any point during this, we'll know. But it's quite funny. You know, one of the things I get quite a lot, both through some people in my own party don't like me, and people it's like, oh, you're a careerist. I'm like, I just kind of look at them. I'm like, mate, see if I was a careerist, would I be in the Labour Party? You know, I mean, in Scotland after the referendum, you know, I'm not doing this for a career. I'm doing it because it's what I believe in. It's what I think's right, and I realise that a lot of people don't agree with me, but I'm really up for having a chat with them. But I know you know, that's certainly something that. You know, I hear that a lot. People say it because my age as well, because, oh, you know, what life experience have you got? And I'm like, I mean, you'd be amazed how much life experience gets thrown at you growing up in Postal.
Mate, life meets you head on.
Definitely. No, definitely. So
I think this is something that actually leads quite nicely into the sort of next sort of talking point. Like, with Kim Long, the Greens, we'd sort of came to this sort of conclusion about authenticity in our politicians and lived experience. And like you'd mentioned Natalie there, for Cisco, that was something that she had said, like, well, I'm just wee Natalie with the ANO. And I was like, you're exactly the type of people that I want to see running in politics and to become a politician, because you're going to have way more weight with your lived experience. You know what these people go through. Like, we're talking about the drug policy. Who better to actually contribute to a drug policy than somebody that's went through the horrific experience of drug addiction? But do you feel yourself that type of authenticity and that type of sort of grassroots in the real world is something that you would like to see in your politicians?
I definitely. You know, it's really, really important. I think, you know, when you look at the Scottish Parliament or the Scottish MPs and House of Commons at the minute, or even in local councils, how many people do you look at and you go, you're like me? Or you know the experiences that I've faced and the challenges that my family have put up with.
We've spoke to 6 of them.
Aye. There's a lot of really good people in politics across the political spectrum who hurl it, but there's not enough of them. And you know, it's a big. I don't like describing myself as authentic because I think it sounds quite, you know, blah. But a lot of people say that to me. I don't know why. Maybe they're I don't know. You know,
I'll tell you something, mate. Me and Matt actually had a private conversation that Matt doesn't mind me talking about your DMs, and I was like, it's so refreshing for somebody to just reply sound, like an actual person that's running for political office to reply, all right, cool, sound. And then when you come into the Zoom call and you were like, all right, how's it going? I'm going to say you're authentic because I feel like that's true. Like, you've got a Glasgow accent, you're no gentrifying your accent, you're replying to DMs as you're not trying to be all sort of formal. So no, you're an authentic person, mate. Like, as far as my experience is.
I'll need to start changing my accent now. Need to modify it on the phones. No, listen, I appreciate that. But I know it's really important, and you know, it's not just about authenticity. It's actually about, you know, one of my colleague Pam, who is a list candidate in Glasgow. She always has. She's a disabled woman. She's in a wheelchair. One of the things she always says is politics is about decisions, and you know, and you know, about if you don't have a seat at the table, it's often because you're on the menu. and that really always, you know, that I think that's a really, really important point. So, you know, politics has to be representative, but also, you know, I think the thing is, you know, I don't see the point in and no being straight with people and no being honest. You know, for example, I'm sure there'll be times in this discussion where we will not agree, but I'm not going to pretend that for you know, just for the, I think you just have to be, you need to be honest with people, you need to be straight. Listen, we might not agree on one issue, whether it's, say, for example, the constitution or tax, or, you know, another issue, a substantive policy, but there's a hell of a lot we all agree on. And we've got a hell of a lot in common, whether it's, you know, how we were brought up, where we were brought up, and I don't think there's enough of that, particularly in the Scottish Parliament at the minute. And that's certainly one of the things that I'd look to bring to the table if I was fortunate enough to be elected as Maryhill and Springburn's MSP.
That factionalism has become counterproductive in a lot of senses, where, as we've just been saying, you know, one party of power can essentially plagiarise the other's good ideas. You know what I mean? And get away with it. But in terms of, we'll circle back around a wee bit to the campaign, but just what I thought, because you just kind of touched on what you'd like to maybe hopefully achieve if you were successful in your election. What other priorities would you say you had if there was like a kind of ideal world scenario? I know obviously there's going to be ups and downs, but what would, you know, your top priorities ideally be?
So one of the reasons I stood, I went to school in Wynford, which is in Maryhill. I don't know if you know it, the old army barracks.
I know it,
and I went to primary school there. Great part of the world, great community. And if I walk 10 minutes up the road, up Kelvindale Road into Clevedon, my life expectancy increased 20 years. You know, I think that's one of the major. My big thing in politics is ending child poverty, and not just saying ending it because it looks good in a leaflet, ending it because, you know, for as long as child poverty is a factor in the fifth richest country in the world and one of the biggest cities in the fifth richest country in the world, working class kids are going to be locked out of opportunities that they could never have. You know, inside every, you know, I'm not going to paraphrase Coke, but it's this argument that, you know, the next scientists, the next athletes, all these are there, and there's just no the opportunities. So ending child poverty and being serious about that. And I don't think the current government, you know, are doing enough, not doing nearly enough to tackle that. So in Maryhill and Springburn, I think it's nearly 4 out of 10 kids are living in poverty, going to bed hungry at night. I just can't fathom how when that's happening. It's insane, you know. This is, and see, the thing is, it's not just that. It's how stark the difference is. So, you know, I use the example of Kelvindale and Wynford, but there's loads of places. See if you walk just a couple of minutes, the difference in life expectancy, the difference in your life chances. I mean, the SKA results that, you know, codified that. It showed you, you know, you go to that school, right, marked in 40%.
They literally drew you a map.
They drew a map. You know, it's the inequalities in Scotland. You know, we like to tell ourselves in Scotland we're a modern, progressive European country. You know, I love all that. I want it to be true, but it doesn't meet reality, and it fries my brain that, you know, that we have politicians that could do more, that could use every single lever of power they have at their disposal to do stuff, and they choose not to. And there's a plethora of reasons as to why that is. And I'm not saying electing one Labour and Co-op MSP in the north of Glasgow is going to make a difference, but I'd work damn hard, and I'd work with other people across all the parties to try and do something about it. And by 2030, child poverty should be consigned to the dustbin of history in Scotland.
I think one does make a difference. Because if we elect one at a time, sooner or later we're going to have enough to get it done. You know what I mean?
So, I mean, what
are the types of things that we can actually do to eradicate child poverty? Because we see quite a lot of, and I'm sure that you've seen it yourself, when the Tories in Westminster decided to vote against giving free breakfasts or free school meals during times when they're not at school. There was quite a lot of uproar. Obviously, we've seen Marcus Rashford get involved. It's taken for like almost celebrities to be politicians to like force this stuff through. But we did also see a sort of viewpoint of, well, why should we when they've got parents there and it's their parents' responsibility, which I do not subscribe to, and I'm not playing devil's advocate here.
No, I get that.
What are the things that we can actually do to eradicate child poverty?
Well, I mean, there's UK wide, which is merely a solidarity point of view for Scotland, because at the end of the day, the only way to stop the Tories is to beat them in a general election, and it's down to my party to do that, and we've failed to do that for the past 10 years. So we need to get that together and kick that shower of, go to watch my language, kick the.
Aye, we can say it.
You can say it. You can say it. To actually drag them kicking and screaming out of Downing Street. So that's our collective job to do that. And I do think, you know, it shouldn't take for Marcus Rashford, great guy, real inspiration. Shouldn't take for a footballer to come out and say that, you know, kids should be fed.
Yeah.
No, this is 2021. There should be simple, basic things that we all agree. Every single person should be able to live with dignity and free from insecurity and fear. I don't think that's radical in a country as rich as the UK. So I think, but in Scotland, Jesus Christ, we could do so much more. So for starters, why are we no topping up every single benefit that the Tories cut? Why do we no end the rape clause? Why do we no end the 2-child cap? Why do we no add £30 onto universal credit and effectively create a universal basic income for everyone? You know, why are we just not trying to do stuff? So the Scottish Child Payment, which is good, you know, it's been described as a game changer by things like the Poverty Line. I welcome the Scottish Child Payment. Let's increase it. Let's make it £30 a week. You know, it isn't complicated. There's only one way to get yourself out of poverty: spend money and spend it early and spend it on the people that need it. And you know, there's been plenty of times when my party and other progressives in the Parliament have tried to do action, and the response from the government seems to be, oh, well, you know, it'd be good to do this, but, you know, we shouldn't have to make up for this evil Tory government in Westminster. I'm like, you lot need a history lesson. The reason we have a Scottish Parliament is to deal with the horrible Tory government in Westminster that nobody voted for. So how do we use the powers of our Parliament? How do we actually make a difference? And how do we stop, you know, cutting services? How do we, you know, things like, you can't cut your way out of a crisis. You need to invest in it, and you need to invest in people. So there's plenty of things that our Parliament could do to tackle child poverty. But the thing is, it's not going to do it unless we get new people in there that are willing to argue for that.
Absolutely. And what about, so just to give you the opportunity, because obviously, like, my mind's going to, well, the argument that you're going to predict is going to come here, well, they set the budgets and then they come up. So if we do add on money to universal credit, we're going to need to cut that somewhere else. Is that true? Is that the reality?
I mean, no, I don't think it's the reality. I think politics in the UK, we've got ourselves in this really. I think COVID shows this. You know, it's like, oh well, we've not got a magic money tree. I'm like, I would. It's called the Bank of England. You know, we've got all this power. You know, one of the largest economies in the world. Why do we not use it? You know, Theresa May could find £1 billion to bribe the DUP. But could they find it to provide free school meals? So this argument, and it's also the thing, you know, in Scotland, you know, if we raise the money, they'll cut our budget. I'm like, well, that's fine. We find the money. Why are the highest earners in Scotland not being asked to pay their fair share? COVID has obviously changed the situation and the argument around tax. But one of, you know, when I first started getting involved in politics, the big thing was people that earn over £150,000 a year should pay 50p on the top rate of tax. And people were arguing, the SNP were happy to argue that at a UK level, but no in Scotland, where they've got the power to do it. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah. So it probably is important to highlight as we're talking that I don't think the Scottish Parliament has the ability to borrow in the same way that Westminster does.
Aye, well, the Scottish Parliament does need stronger borrowing powers. Aye.
We've got opportunities to raise tax, and I know that a lot on, you know, the national side of things almost see that as a kind of unionist trap because they're going to get pummeled for raising taxes if they do it. But obviously on the other side, they're going to get pummeled if they don't because services are going to. So just to kind of like clarify some of that there.
I agree with that point. The Parliament needs stronger borrowing powers. The Parliament needs borrowing powers of a Parliament. And that has to, you know, that is a good point. But there's still, you know, the point about tax, you know, at the end of the day, I think when you ask the vast majority of people in Scotland, do you want world-class public services and do you want people to be safe and secure, I'd be quite happy to pay an extra couple of £. You know, it's like, I think, you know, we talk about maybe trying to get rid of the council tax. And I think the vast majority of people would be up for it. Maybe not.
If we're asking the government to use their power, we obviously need to be willing to take that on ourselves.
The point about borrowing is very sound, and I agree with you. So that's a fair point.
So in terms of, since we're talking about tax and money and whatever else, did I see through the course of the week, just in terms of the campaign, that you absolutely rattled fundraising targets? Was it like 3 or 4 times there? What you'd
four times. No, running. No, it feels brilliant. I mean, I've never had Catholic guilt quite like I have when I did that crowdfunder. I do not like asking people for money. I really don't. Like, it makes my skin crawl. But what I did, obviously, put it up, and you know, I said, "Oh, we'll try to raise £1,000 in a month." By the end of day one, we'd raised over 1,500, and I'm like, holy fuck, Jesus Christ. And, you know, it was a huge, so we've raised over £4,000. And it's just a huge confidence boost for me. You know, I get really bad imposter syndrome. You know, I'm 23 and I'm standing for Parliament, first time ever doing it. Like, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? It was a huge, not just a boost of confidence in me, but in our campaign. You know, we're trying to run a really good campaign in Maryhill and Springburn, and with COVID and everything, it's just it's really hard and it's really expensive. And the average donation, you know, the thing is, like, people are like, oh, I keep getting leaflets for Douglas Ross. How have I not had anything for Labour? I'm like, well, the Tories don't have a problem with money, but Labour, and particularly in Mass ELP, my branch, really, really poor part of the city. Our members can't fork over thousands of pounds. So the average donation's a £5 or a £10, and it's built up. And you know, I can't get my head around it. It's been brilliant. But I think it shows that people think that, you know, it's a fight worth fighting. It's worth chipping in to the fighting fund, so to speak.
I think that's going to be pretty pleasing for you know, obviously your background's point of view, that there are those small donations. I know when we've seen the fundraising target being hit, I was a bit like, I wonder where that came from, because that's just my cynical brain working in overdrive. But at the same time, to hear that it was for small donors is something that can only really sort of validate your position, that the people of that area do actually like have faith in you.
I mean, there was a few comrades who are better off and were incredibly generous. So I'm no saying, like, you know, there were people that gave away. No,
that was a joke.
Aye, but you know, it's no, you know, but it was, the majority was small donators, £5s and £10s. Some people were very generous with their cash, and, you know, were very, you know, didn't want to make a big song and dance about it. But it was a huge, you know, vote of confidence in us and our campaign team, and Zara and my mate, who's a sort of fundraising lead, pretty scary woman. So I think a lot of people knew better than to chip in. So she's hype woman in chief. So we did great. But like I say, you know, this election's COVID, it just makes everything so much more expensive. So that money's not going to be there for much longer. So I'm going to need to try and make it last.
How is the feeling in the camp at the moment? Like, obviously, like, that's a great confidence boost that you've hit your the budget, because it's a big part of politics is money, I suppose. Like,
unfortunately.
Unfortunately. But how are you feeling about the campaign overall at the moment?
I think I was selected in August 2019, so I've been doing this for quite a while. And, you know, I didn't expect to win the selection, but local members put their trust in me, and you know, it's a big honour being a candidate for my party. You know, I take it really seriously, and I try my best. COVID, without going in, obviously COVID's been horrible, and, you know, it's been really, really frustrating from my point of view as a candidate, because the sort of things that I said when I was running for selection, I said I'm a hard worker, I will put in a shift, every weekend we'll be speaking to people, we'll be talking to them in their terms, we're not going to talk down to people, and we've not been able to do that because for most of the year we've been locked down. So that means we've had, and the fact is the election's 10 weeks away, and, you know, it's getting to a situation where I will not be able to go and knock on anyone's door and ask for their vote. And I might not even be able to deliver leaflets while wearing a face mask and gloves on my own. Like, that's the state we're in. So how I think there's also a question for democracy there. You know, regardless of where you fall in the political spectrum, this election is really, really important for Scotland's future. And if it can't be run, like a proper election, you know, like have a proper debate about the future of the country, should we really be having the election in 10 weeks? But obviously, you know, we'll find there's a statement in Parliament next week about what's going to happen, but it's looking really. It's going to be. It is going to be an election unlike any other. But I think, you know, we are. I think we've done it in Maryhill and Springburn. We've tried. You know, I've always tried to be an active candidate to be at the front, and, you know, showing that the Labour Party's changed. You know, we're under the same party that, you know, that people associate with. You know, there are new people that are trying to make a difference and are working in their communities and try to help people. But you know, I think you know, people say the polls and go, you've got no chance, and I'm like, well, you know what, you're allowed to think that. I know the conversations I'm having with ordinary people across Glasgow. There's a bit of change in there. I think people, I do genuinely think that after 14 years of one party being in power, that, you know, there's an appetite for a change.
mean, there is polling today that says, although, you know, people are still in favour of independence after whatever 20 odd surveys in a row, that the numbers are, the figures are starting to tighten. I think it's, you know, a lot about what's been going on with the noise in recent weeks and stuff like that. But there has got to be fatigue at this point. I mean, you know, as much as we've voted in line with independence and stuff like that in recent years, like, there are gaping deficiencies in the government, and like, wait until independence is just not an acceptable answer when people are suffering. And I think that's why it's important that we speak to guys like yourself. You know what I mean?
I mean that's a whole. And you know, I think the first time we engaged it was when I did that interview with the Nine, and you know, my whole thing was, you know, I voted yes because I thought the only way to change things was through that. And now I've realised a lot of the things I do want to change could be done now. I appreciate that different people could, but that, you know, it's a bit like when we've got an opportunity to do something, why don't we do it? Why don't we actually? And you know, I do think folk. It's very volatile. Obviously, I think the poll that came out today was pretty stark, and you know, I'm sure we'll talk about it. But I don't think an SNP majority government is good for anyone. You know, and I'll use the example. One of the things that I worked on quite a lot with James Kelly MSP was repealing the Football Act. I think that's a perfect example of why the SNP effectively can't be trusted with a majority. I mean, they can't be trusted with a minority either, because I can remember, you know, I've never been more angry watching a debate in Parliament than when SNP and Tory MSPs voted in the emergency COVID legislation to like block a renters fund, not ban evictions, no provide sector.
They were at it again this week, weren't they? Took the Green Party to actually like save a deal by siding with the Tories.
I mean, if you actually look at who votes with who in the Parliament, Labour and the Greens vote together much more, and the SNP and the Tories. It just depends on the issues. Obviously, there's some pretty big policy differences. But I do like. I think folk are like folk in Scotland have had to vote more times in the past 10 years than most democracies, and that's because you know, obviously we've got loads of elections, referendums. Folk are absolutely scunnered, and I think for a large part of last year, people were not interested in party politics. If I phoned somebody, went, "You vote Labour?" like that, you know, everything that's going on. So I think, you know, we didn't talk to people about voting. What we did was we were out campaigning and we were out supporting the COVID response. You know, I mean, I live in Postal, so I was helping young people's futures. I was also trying to help out in Springburn and different parts of Maryhill. You know, there was loads of people just, it wasn't in people's radar. But unfortunately, there's a crucial election 10 weeks away, and we need to have that debate. The country needs to have a debate. It needs to have a discussion.
I think it needs to have an honest debate as well.
Definitely.
Sorry, did on you go?
I think like the UBI point that you made earlier is a prime example of like why people need to be engaged. Like universal basic income was like a tailor-made solution to what's been going on in the last sort of year. To looks like will potentially stretch out to 18 months, maybe potentially 2 years by the time we get to see the other side of this. But it felt like there's an easy solution here, but instead the governments have kind of like gave that money, it seems, to their pals and businesses instead of giving it to people.
Politics is about choices, and one of the biggest choices you need to make is who you help. And I tend to side on the side that you help the most people with the most, you do the most good for the most people with the time you have. I think I was on a call the other day with Senator Sarah McBride, who's the first trans state senator in Delaware, which is obviously Joe Biden's home state. And she said that. And I
speaking about her on the show when she got elected.
She was brilliant. You know, I'm not just saying that. Like I go to talks a lot, and you know, particularly with everything that's going on with the GRA, and you know, all the debate around that. It was actually really reaffirming and quite good for the soul. You know, God, politics doesn't have to be about hate and division. You can actually, you know, we need that. We need more of that in Scotland. We need more like unity of purpose, and her talking about it. So I think, you know, go back to the point about, you know, I don't trust the current government of Scotland or the current political establishment of Scotland to make political decisions that will work for people like me or my family or people in my community.
Yeah,
I think like there's a level.
Sorry, mate, on you go. I'll wait that up.
No, you go.
I was going to say that for somebody that's voted, I've voted SNP since 2014, and I think Matt's the same. But we've had the on the ball, the period. We had Erin on the ball. We've had Paul Quigley from the football against criminalisation. So we've covered a lot of what we're talking about that the SNP. So see, when it comes to like an actual policy, and I think this is part of the issue that Scottish Labour face when it comes to that. When we talk about policies, I'm on board with you, mate.
Aye.
But it's just the perpetual Tory governments in Westminster and the disconnect that's happening between England and the rest of the United Kingdom, that I feel like they're shifting to the right and we went more towards the left. And I think that this is the big issue when it comes to this, is why the Scottish Labour Party not went, we will become the dominant force in this country once we have independence. Like, that's what it felt to me, actually, to all my mates.
You'd have my vote tomorrow.
SNP,
you know what I mean? Like,
get independence, and then I will start voting Labour again, because this is. But it's been kind of like frustrating and annoying for it to not be part of like Scottish Labour going, let's just, you know what I mean?
Aye. So there's a couple of points there. So the first thing I would say is around the issue with the Tories winning elections. The UK is broken, like as a political institution. I say this a lot. I have said this since Brexit. You know, if it doesn't change radically under a Labour government that wins the next election, you know, I remember you know, you mentioned Paul Sweeney, who's a mate of mine, and I mentioned Pam. So I campaigned for both of them in Glasgow North and Glasgow North East. Two brilliant candidates. Paul's a really hard-working MP. Pam would have been a phenomenal MP.
Absolutely.
We campaigned night and day in the pissing freezing cold, and we still lost. And you know, I said I was really deflated after that. I'm like, I don't know how many more times I can go to people's door and tell them they need to vote Labour to get rid of the Tories, and we can't do it. You know, that really weighs on my soul. You know, our inability to do that. And you know, I don't want to get into the debate about how Labour lost the last election. The fact is,
of course,
we didn't. Not enough people voted for us. Right, that's basic arithmetic. More people need to vote for us. I don't think we get more people to vote for us by no arguing for the things we know are right and good. And I also think in Scotland we need to kind of, I've said this before, we need to get, you know, when I think, so it was the 20th anniversary of the Parliament last year, of devolution, and you know, people are sharing this speech that Donald Dewar gave in the first day of the Parliament, and you know, all that, you know, a new voice for the land, you know.
Yep.
And where is that current passion in Scottish Labour? Where's that constitutional radicalism? And you know, there's stuff coming through. You know, I mean, I chair a group called, I co-chair a UK group, a faction in the Labour Party called Open Labour. We've got a book coming out at our conference called with a group called Politics for the Many, and you know, there's my mate Declan McLean, who's actually my election agent and campaign manager, wrote a really good chapter in devolution and where we need to go from here. And you know, the fact is, if Labour can't come forward with a clear plan to totally overhaul the way that Britain's governed, Britain won't exist. The UK, sorry, no Britain, the UK.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. This political arrangement that we have between the people, different people of these islands, will cease to exist. So that's a key point. On the issue around the, sorry mate, on you go.
I was going to say on the devolution one, because it is, you know, it is largely the answer we get when we speak to Labour people is some variance of it, right? And I get that, you know, 2014, when Gordon Brown's intervention came and went, on the day, it pretty much overnight became a de facto almost referendum on, you know, further devolution that people went out and voted for. Obviously, it didn't happen for, you know, numerous reasons, whatever. We're not getting into those. But, like, I'm not conscious of seeing any polling since then that says anybody in Scotland is interested in devolution, even though I hear it spoke a lot about by Labour Party members and MSPs and MPs, and like, is there evidence that there's an appetite in Scotland for further devolution ahead of independence at this point?
I think it depends how you frame it. I think the reason nobody's asking a poll about it is because I don't think it suits either the Tory or the SNP narrative. You know, at the end of the day, like I don't believe in devolution as a political form of governance, or, you know, more federal. You know, I'm pretty relaxed about what we call it. I don't agree in changing the status quo because I don't like independence. You know, I don't really set my politics up in that way. I believe it because I generally think it's the best situation, and I appreciate that other people disagree with, and I'm up for having that. You know, I really do enjoy having a chat with people that don't agree with me on it. What I would say is, you know, at the end of the day, the Tories, it's really one of the things that really get me, particularly the Scottish Tories. I really do think they are their politics is just so toxic, and it's about one thing, and it's this sort of Ian Paisley never approach. And the Tories love this, because the only reason the Tories have votes left in Scotland is because people that hate the SNP or hate independents vote for them. And at the end of the day, Labour can't reply on just no voters. We need yes voters. And the thing is, my big thing is bringing people together. So people involved in my campaign couldn't be further away than each other in those two issues, but they want to work together, because there is actually, we do care about more together than that one issue.
The stuff we can achieve together.
There is. It's like the back of your Labour Party membership card says, by the strength of your common endeavour, we achieve more together than we do alone. And the point we made earlier on about England being so divergent, I actually think we need to break that down, because I think it isn't. Manchester, Liverpool, large parts of North Wales, London, there's these. The problem, the part of the system, we have this broken system of government with first past the post, which means the Tories can win a majority government with nothing close to even a half a majority of the votes. So, part of Labour, and Keir said he's going to, Keir will be the first Prime Minister, go into election and say, I'm going to take power away from me and give it to you. Also, one of the big things, I'm a democratic socialist, and I'm a constitutional geek as well. We do need to change how power and wealth and sovereignty is shared in these islands. The UK, Mark Drakeford, who's the First Minister of Wales, says the UK is a voluntary association of nations. I subscribe to that point of view. It's not permanent. It has to. At the end of the day, I want the UK to work. I want it to work for people in Glasgow. I want it to work for people in Liverpool. But the problem is, it's never going to work until we get rid of the Tories. And just come back to the point about devolution isn't working right now, because it was designed for a time in our politics when the UK government and the Scottish government were basically the same and agreed and all this. So the system of government needs actually to be updated, and we need to have a way where, ideally, I'd like it. We could design it away so there'd never be another Tory government. But I don't know if I could get that through. But at the end of the day, it needs. Well, it feels like a civil war sometimes already.
The culture war, as they're calling it.
Honest, if I could, that word, Jesus, culture war,
horrible.
The culture wars. I think what you're saying there, I believe, is that we need to get back to politicians representing people, like the politicians.
Instead of ideals.
Yeah, they're driven by ideologies, and also they want to maximise business. But they've somewhere along the way they shifted away from actually representing the people that vote for them and representing the people that fund them. And I feel like this is where it needs to turn. So hearing you say stuff like we need to constitutionally look at the balance of power and money, and that's all basically singing for my hymn sheet, really, because that's what I want. And I feel like and this is my own personal view is that the SNP aren't that much better than what we've got or what we've had down south. Out with maybe Boris and his pals, but they aren't that much better.
The current stance on the potential for another referendum is, it's bullshit straight out the Trump playbook. It's been in manifesto pledges previously. It's been roundly rejected. I don't get why third time or fourth time or however many times we've tried it, it'll be the charm this time. So the notion is, again, I don't know what your opinion on it is, Kieran, but it seems like an unrealistic notion that a Holyrood majority is going to secure another independence referendum. So the keystone of the campaign is an absolute falsehood.
I agree with you. I'm not saying I think it's acceptable that we can have a Prime Minister that ignores. Let's just get this straight. The person that will destroy the UK is Boris Johnson. He is. I respect that point of view. I'm just worried about all the damage you might do. While trying to do it. But I just have to look at something like the Internal Market Bill. The man is an absolute abomination. Even before you get into any of the sort of horrendous social policy, just Disney respect devolution. Disney respect the idea that different parts of the UK should be different countries of the UK. Our nations have the right to determine policies best suited to their needs. I grew up with devolution, so that approach is not just alien; it's actually offensive to me. And the people in, you get all these Scottish Tory, and particularly in Wales, let's cancel devolution; it'll solve all the problems. What are they smoking? you know, this it's the settled will of the Scottish people, and it's the settled will of the people of Wales, and obviously Ireland has a very bespoke arrangement, which is really, really important. The Good Friday Agreement, of course. So I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, Boris needs to go, and I chat. Tories always go, oh, you can't trust Labour. With the Tories try to appeal to the lowest common denominator.
Absolutely,
you can't trust Labour. I'm sorry, no, Labour are the ones that are willfully destroying. This they call it the precious union. You wouldn't know through the way they act about it, and the damage they do to it.
Maybe precious in the Gollum sense, where they're this horrible monster that's something unreasonably.
For a party that's sole defining issue is the union, they're terrible. Their agenda for it is appalling.
Yeah, mate. They're just, see what you're saying there about the smoking. They're high on the idea of their supremacy. Really, they think that they know better. They still believe in the empire. It's all fucking bullshit that's been written into history books by British people about Britishness and all this nonsense that in the 80s.
The halcyon day that never existed.
Aye, and particularly with quite a lot of their English MPs that got in under Johnson, they're Trumpists. Like, it's absolutely, there's no two ways about it. They're absolute, they're borderline fascistic at times, and yeah. There's only one way to deal with that sort of politics.
And all the rest of it is just.
Aye. Well, I had an argument with my own party about that. It is horrific. And it's really, really concerning. What they've tried to get away with while COVID's been going on. But this won't come as a shock to you. I do not trust the Tories as far as I could throw them. And
no.
You could say I'm predispositioned at that point of view, but my experience of dealing with them is backed up by that. So, I
think as we talk about areas where, although there's things that we clearly disagree on, I think we've covered enough constitutional stuff to probably, cover us for quite a few weeks. One of the areas that I think our, interests align in terms of our reluctance to stay part of the UK, but also your position within the Labour Party and movement, and that's workers' rights. I obviously have wanted to comment on this for a wee while, but I need to be quite careful given that I'm a previous British Gas employee. So, what we're talking about here is Brexit deals. I mean, hire and fire. I mean, some of the practices that are coming in are square in the pure centre spot of what we need the Labour Party to step up and protect us with.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Aye. No, definitely. And, at the end of the day, I think that's one of the real regrets why we're no longer in the EU. And I remember campaigning to stay in Europe, and then following that, when we thought it was possible to stop Brexit, that you can't trust a Tory government with workers' rights, and I had Lexiteers laughing at me. Nobody's laughing now, so you're completely right. I think at the end of the day, you can't trust them with workers' rights, and that actually it's one of the biggest arguments for why I devolve employment law at Scotland. So it's a bargain basement, and we're all fighting to cut standards. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Michael D. Higgins, who's the president of Ireland, gave a speech in the Dáil when they passed the minimum wage, and it's one of the best speeches I've ever watched. And he talks about a floor by which no worker can fall. That's the way I would adopt a powers model. There's a UK standard that should be pretty high, but it can be topped up if there's the desire to do that. And what's happening with British Gas, and I'll declare an interest as a GMB shop steward, and my mate Hazel's basically running the strike.
All right.
So
what about day 23, day 20?
Yeah, I know it's broken up here different things, but it's just. It's like something of the Victorian era. I've been hired and refired when I was a fast food worker. We got moved over, and I lost hundreds of pounds of holiday pay as a result, and we couldn't do anything about it. So it's a really, really old tactic, and it's one of these things like, why did we not ban this? There's quite a few laws that the last Labour government didn't change, and the Labour movement holds up its hands like, right, we were too happy when we won. We actually probably should have changed a few more things. We've got the strictest trade union laws in Europe. That can't go on. So I think the point about workers' rights is crucial. And that goes into so many things. It's not just about stop and hire and refire. It's about valuing workers. So, loads of people, particularly politicians, were clapping for the NHS, on Thursday. It was great, but won't vote to give them a pay rise or won't vote to give care workers a wage they should always have been paid. So it goes into a at the end of the day, I'm a trade unionist, I'm a shop steward. Workers' rights fundamentally crucial to my politics. And we don't not enough people talk about it. Even in the Labour, it's quite funny. There's some people in the Labour Party go, you look at like the issues going on in schools in England and then potentially striking and going, oh well, we have to take it. We can't just be on the side of unions. You're a member of the Labour Party. I mean, it's in the name. The Labour Party is the political wing of the trade union movement. It's not the other way around.
Do you want to come back in and try that?
Do you want to put down whatever you've been drinking and then sober up a bit and come back? But what's happening in British Gas, and I don't know if you saw, you might have saw the leaked video of one of the high Hegians in British Gas going, oh, it's been great, because of all the COVID deaths, nobody's picked up in this strike. I'm like these are people that are paid.
That's mental.
Look it up. I'll send it on to you. Basically in a Zoom meeting, there's not been any because of the COVID deaths. It was something else. The American election, nobody's picked up in the strike. And Gary Smith, who's a good mate of mine, who's the GMB Scotland secretary, who used to work, who was the national officer for the GMB and gas at a UK level, went absolutely through them. At the end of the day, it's absurd that a big, a company that is meant to be, providing a public service is treating its staff like this. And all power to comrades and British Gas and Scottish Gas that are fighting, fighting for what's right. And I don't think it's unreasonable. And just on the point about workers' rights, one of the other things, a bit of unfinished business for me is getting jobs back to the Calais and Springburn. It's just like we got to this point in our politics in Scotland where we don't stand with workers and their struggles. I just don't. And I don't mean the Labour Party and trade unions did, but I don't know how you could stand by and watch workers leave a site for the last time.
170 jobs lost, something like that.
Over 200. The site had been active for over 146 years.
My dad was there 30 of them.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't know that. It's just this thing like we don't stand with workers, and it's like, oh well, if we could do something, we would. And it's this whole sort of like laissez-faire attitude, a polity in Scotland that just isn't cutting it anymore. It can't cut it anymore in a post-COVID world. We can't go back to the situation where governments are, maybe we could do something, but we can't. It's like Yes Minister. It's like the 5 stages of maybe we'll do something or maybe we won't. It's mad. But bottom line is, British Gas, Scottish Gas, if you hadn't done already, please support the strike. Stop the Great British Gas Fire. And at the end of the day, make sure that these workers, they're not being unreasonable, they're just asking to be treated fairly like everyone else. And the thing is, big companies like this think they can get away with it, and they're in for a bloody shock.
They're really only asking for their contracts to be honoured, aren't they?
They're just, at the end of the day, you could get in a wider point about how employment is not a meeting of equals. It's not a partnership. There is an employer who takes advantage. But the demand, it's no like, the demands are most moderate, let's put it that way. All they want is the terms and conditions that their unions negotiated and that the employer agreed to. At the end of the day, whenever this happens, it's to line the pockets of shareholders and fatten already quite fat cats. There's no a business case for changing terms and conditions of hardworking employees or staff. It's sometimes it's ideological, but mostly it's just because people who are already ridiculously wealthy would like a bit more.
Yeah, it's almost like if they don't continue record growth, record profit margins, and I remember reading an article where it was like disaster for Centrica. They only made 17 billion last year, and you're like, wait a minute, wait a fucking minute. They're starting to lay people off because they made 20 billion the year before, and they're only making 17 billion this year. And you're like, this is where capitalism has started to unravel in itself. We heard that how dare you speak about unlimited growth? And this is the problem: is that they want to keep growing and keep making more money. One of the things that always sticks with me in regards to that system, capitalism, but growth for the sake of growth might be the logic of capitalism. It's also the logic of a cancer cell.
You know, it's
But that's it. It can only grow so much. It can only get so big before, like,
it's a really and you know it's a pass over a, you know, Thatcherism. This idea that, you know, growth. What are we growing? What are we building? And if it's no, and you know, it's when people talk, the Tories said build back better. I'm like, I mean, things were pretty shite before the pandemic. I don't
want to be the guy that
that
makes up their 3-word slogans. He must be getting paid an absolute fucking fortune, by the way.
Probably the taxpayer, I know. Do you know what I mean? It's just a bit like where this idea that, like, what happened before was a good way of doing it. You know, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. I'm like that. It makes my skin crawl. You know, it really does. I'm like, how lucky do you need to be to have been totally oblivious to the insecurity that the vast majority of people in Glasgow, in Scotland, across the UK have to deal with in their daily lives?
I mean, COVID has exposed them all. You know what I mean? Like, it should be a you know, an almost map for us for the things that we need to target now.
Well, we need to, you know, I just hope so. But we need people that are going to make that point.
Absolutely, mate. And that just goes back to, like, the sort of Trumpian, like, make America great. And you're like, what era do you want to pick? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you trying to get back to? Like, what do you want to go back to, being able to beat up your wife and not have the accountability of that?
Or when segregation was, I think that's the thing, you know, particularly in the right of politics, you know, they talk about, you know, or, you know, in the good old day and stuff, and it's a bit like, what about that do you want back? And it's always, you know, it's the whole thing about the pace of change in conservatism is a snail's pace. You know, they're trying to maintain a system that's slowly falling apart. I just don't get people that's about their politics. Like, what are you trying to sustain? Because it's nobody's life's getting any better.
Yeah, it's like conservatism. What are we conserving? Like,
well, it's the same. It's you know, I say the same thing about the SNP. I'm like, what's so good at the minute? What are we trying to do? You know, what is our defining mission? What are we trying to achieve? And I just don't see it for anyone. It's just, oh God, I mean, could go down a rabbit hole there probably.
No, I'm with you. I think we're getting pretty close to the time anyway. So, and wrapping up, you know, if anybody's listening in and thinking to themselves, like, I can go on board with this. Like, I like that, you know, Labour is trying to push progressive ideas. There is clearly, like, stuff about, you know, workers' protections and rights that would be pretty hard to disagree with. Like, if somebody's so inspired, how can they get themselves involved with the campaign?
Twitter, Facebook, email me. I mean, I'm Keiran O'Neill. Just Google that. Weird spelling, but you'll figure it out eventually. And get involved in the camp, because, you know, I say this all the time. Like, the campaign isn't my camp; it's everyone that gets involved. And, you know, there's a really, really good team in Maryhill and Springburn, a Labour activist, and some people who might not be Labour activists, but are helping us out. You know, and at the end of the day, folk might want to say, oh, this election's, all the tides of history are only flowing in one direction, apparently. I don't buy that, and I think anything could happen. And we're certainly going to throw the kitchen sink at it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I think anybody that has had any sort of, you know, inclinations to buy into it, and we've spoken about the day, like, needs to start thinking about second votes and stuff like that, because I think 2 votes SNP is an absolute joke, and I think there's other parties like yourself making great arguments that can allow balance in the Parliament and hopefully allow us to, you know, provide more balance in the legislation as well.
No, definitely. I think, you know, the fact is, like I said before, I don't think an SNP majority government's good for anyone. I would urge everyone to do both votes Labour, realising everyone's going to do that. But, you know, like I always say, you know, the Labour Party has changed. It will continue to change until we win back the trust of people we lost. And, you know, I know we've said this all the time, but give us a chance and we'll do our best. You know, all we're asking for is a chance to serve and to try and make a difference and to improve people's lives. And it's not just me doing that. There's candidates all over Glasgow or Scotland, both in the constituency and the list that are trying to do that. And we don't agree on everything, but, you know, at the end of the day, I think we all agree we want a better, fairer and more just country. And the only way you get that is by voting for it.
Amazing, mate.
Outstanding.
Well, thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it.
That's been great. Really appreciate it.
I made a promise to whom will not to you, so stop the party. I tried to reconcile a life I lived a while, just stop the party. Feeding I know we'll make it through smiles and trials of fire. We'll make the party. I see right through it, the great desert to fade. You call the party. Feeding lies like you'll never know. I don't need to be unhappy with a life to call my